From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.
At the Legislature today, demonstrators for and against coal squared off in front of Governor Tomblin's office at the state capitol. A special report tonight on home rule in Huntington. The city's new mayor says it's working. And we'll talk with the mayor of Charleston about that and the city's gun ordinance that the House wants to strike down. This is the Legislature Today. And good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. Major news today regarding the state's overcrowded prison system. Governor Tomblin said he will introduce legislation that proposes to close the Industrial Home for Youth, a maximum security prison for juveniles in Salem, and turn it into a medium security adult prison. The young offenders will be moved to other facilities by July 1st. A spokeswoman for the governor said corrections officers at Salem will be offered jobs at the new facility. Also today, 31 days into the 60-day session, the first bill is on its way to the governor's desk. Senate Bill 197 is a supplemental appropriations bill for the Department of Health and Human Resources to help low-income families pay for child care. It was a more hectic day in the Senate than we've seen so far this session as members considered the passage of Governor Tomblin's education reform bill. The Senate split into two floor sessions, the second strictly to focus on Senate Bill 359. But as Ashton Mara reports, the bill will have to wait until next week to be taken up for a vote.
It was business as usual in the Senate this morning as senators passed two resolutions, saw the introduction of 12 new bills, and unanimously passed 4 bills to send to the House for their approval. But it was one bill in particular, the governor's education reform bill, that received special attention today.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that further consideration of Senate Bill 359 be deferred until the conclusion of bills on first reading.
As the morning floor session came to a close,
declare the Senate in recess.
Senator Unger made another motion.
Mr. President, I move the Senate stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Without any further discussion of Senate Bill 359. Senators waited late into the afternoon, an unusual scene on the floor for a Friday, and finally reconvened at 3 o'clock. But the discussion in the second session didn't last as long as initially expected.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate Bill 359 lay over one day.
Senate President Jeff Kessler says the decision came after lawmakers, union leaders, and representatives of the governor's office couldn't come to an agreement during closed-door meetings on the current state of the bill. Meetings, Kessler says, during which interested parties can speak more openly.
You can have frank discussions. You know, I'm not an educator. You can have educators in the room, the stakeholders in the room, and also the folks on the other side to have a better idea of what they think can pass over there. I mean, a bill only becomes law in 3 ways. Passes here, passes there, signed by the governor. So having all the representatives of all 3 participating in some of the discussions and those negotiations certainly gives you a much better feel for whether or not it's something that can pass.
He says lying over the bill gives them some extra time to work out the details still being debated, including hiring practices, school calendars, and the national program Teach for America. Senator Daniel Hall of Wyoming County says had the bill been put to a vote today without any further amendments, he would have voted no, and expected about 6 other senators would have done the same.
Seniority still needs to be a part of hiring, I believe. I don't think it needs to be the entire package. I don't think it needs to be the determining factor, but it needs to be a part of the equation when we're hiring teachers. And I think we're getting close to some language in the law or the bill that everybody can agree with. And we also need to address the school calendar issue.
Kessler says he expects the bill to make it through the Senate on Monday and be passed over to the House.
I think we're getting close, and we just figured we'd take another day or two and see if we can get it in final version that maybe may be more acceptable to both sides, so we can get a bill out of here hopefully by the end of maybe through the entire legislature by the end of next week.
But without changes, Hall says we may not see the usual 34-0 passage that's come for almost every other bill successfully pushed through by the upper house. A new bill introduced on the floor today, sponsored by Senator Mike Green from Raleigh County, would give the Senate some oversight in the Board of Education's hiring of future state superintendents.
It takes the state superintendent of schools, which is appointed by the State Board of Education, and brings it under the advice and consent of the Senate, which currently the state fire marshal and the state superintendent of schools do not come under the advice and consent of the West Virginia State Senate.
Green says every gubernatorial appointment receives the consent of the Senate. Similar to Senator Unger's proposed constitutional amendment yesterday, Green says the bill gives the Senate more of a say into the state education system.
We just wanted to make sure that with everything that happened over the past year with the Board of Education and the superintendent of schools, that we had a little more input in who that person was going to be. And it's obviously we've shown here in the last year that it's a very important position. Can have a lot of positive or adverse effects on our education system. So we wanted to bring that person, make sure they do come forward the process and the advice and consent of the West Virginia State Senate.
This bill, however, does not require a change to the Constitution. The superintendent serves at the will and pleasure of the State Board of Education, which Green says would still be able to terminate the superintendent without any consent from the legislature. For the Legislature Today, I'm Ashton Mara in the Senate.
At the Capitol today, environmental activists rallied against the coal and natural gas industries. As Dave Mistich reports, the group was met with opposition as each side sought to influence legislators' opinions on extraction industries.
About 100 protesters gathered on the north side of the Capitol today, holding signs and chanting. Environmental groups were on one side, coal miners and other supporters on the other. Roger Horton, a coal miner who works for Patriot Coal in Logan County, was part of the counter-protest.
What you saw today was democracy in action. You saw two sides that are divided about the power industry, about how we should proceed in the future. And the vast majority of these people who are here protesting mountaintop mining, coal, and fracking are paid to be here. They're not from this area, the vast majority of them are not. I work in the coal industry. It's been good to be in my family. It's sustained this state for well over 100 years and has a very promising future if our legislators and our delegates are smart enough to make sure that we have the ways and means to do it.
Yet the protest didn't end outside, as environmental activists paraded past the coal supporters, up the steps, and into the Capitol. They eventually made their way out in front of the governor's office. Dustin White of Boone County works as an organizer with Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition. He explained the group's mission as both sides of the protest rallied behind him.
Well, we're here today to mainly talk about the health impacts of these practices because too many people, there are ways to produce electricity that doesn't put people in jeopardy. We are fighting for that type of future. West Virginia has so much other that we could be capitalizing on and not putting people's lives at risk. Yes, we understand that coal mining has been an important part of the state, but it's something that it's an archaic energy source, and we need to start moving into the future.
While protesters from Mountain Justice and other environmental groups hope to end dependency on coal and reduce the hazards of that and other extraction industries, they've taken specific issue with House Bill 2579. That bill seeks to loosen water quality standards for selenium discharges from coal mines. Dustin Steele, a protester from Mingo County, says dissatisfaction with that bill brought the protest here.
It's a large part. It just comes to a larger cycle that shows the legislator had been subservient to the coal industry for the entire existence of the coal industry. And this is something that only affects people's drinking water.
Delegate Josh Nelson, a freshman delegate and a coal miner from Boone County, joined other coal supporters shortly after the House floor session. He argued that the science cited by the protesters, which argues for stricter water standards, is unsound.
You have to simply look at the science. If you were to take a bottle of Dasani water straight out of a Coke machine and take it onto a mining operation and pour it out, that company would get fined thousands of dollars, up to millions of dollars. This unsound science that has created these selenium standards has put the industry in bad shape. We want to make sure that our water's clean, that our ecosystems are protected, but at the same time we're being reasonable and we're being in a place where we can still operate.
Today's protest was part of Mountain Justice's spring break, which included a similar protest in Virginia last week. For the Legislature Today, I'm Dave Mistich at the Capitol.
The cities that are participating in the Home Rule Pilot program are looking to the legislature to continue the experiment, and other cities are hoping to join in. Senate Bill 435 to continue and expand the Home Rule Pilot project passed the Senate last week. The bill is now in the hands of the House Government Organization Committee. The new mayor of Huntington, Steve Williams, is hoping to see a continuation of the Home Rule Pilot project that he says is helping the city. Clark Davis reports.
Upon being elected as Huntington mayor, Steve Williams went right to work making changes throughout the city. He says there is only one way to help the city grow.
Yes, we could use more revenue, and the way that we get that additional revenue is by growing the economy, encouraging people to invest in the city and attracting businesses into the area. That's how the revenue will grow without us coming in and tapping somebody on the shoulder and say, you need to give us more.
Good evening, everyone. We'll call the February 11th, 2013 Huntington City Council meeting to order.
The mayor is hoping there will be no changes to the Home Rule Pilot project. Since its inception in 2007, the pilot program has given autonomy to Huntington, Charleston, Wheeling, and Bridgeport on certain decisions affecting the city.
The biggest concern that we have is the Home Rule statute. We think that the Home Rule statute has given us the opportunity to be able to do some things and be innovative, and we ask for your support.
Williams recently met with a local legislative delegation to make it known how important the project has been to Huntington. Through the project, the city has created a land bank system to help with an abundance of dilapidated houses in the city. They've decreased the business and operation tax for businesses to encourage new ones to move in, and they've enacted a sales tax in the city.
By giving us the ability to be innovative in how we make policy for our own individual community just makes good sense. Those people in the Eastern Panhandle, do they care whether I pave 11th Avenue in Huntington or Ritter Boulevard? Why should that decision be made in Charleston? Home rule is a major issue that we need to address.
Williams says other parts of home rule that the previous administration started, such as an occupation tax, won't be attempted during his administration. The occupation tax is stuck in court proceedings in Kanawha County.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm going to ask you, you have a...
Mark Bates, the chair of the Huntington City Council, agrees that home rule works at the local level.
Your politics is very local, and many folks never meet their state senator or they never meet their delegate, but they meet their city council member. They meet their mayor, because what's important to them are things on the local level. And I think that home rule provides the ability to keep things more local.
Okay, if nothing else, we'll move on to item 6.
Bates says the city has begun to look forward with what home rule has allowed.
Basically with home rule, the land bank has been very successful. The sales tax that was enacted that allowed us to cut B&O taxes in half on retail and service has been very successful and could be a model for the state in a way that municipalities would be able to raise funds.
Leave the taxes or the ordinances that have been put in place.
Mayor Williams previously served in the West Virginia House of Delegates representing Cabell and Wayne counties from 1987 to 1994. He says that will help with his relationship with the local delegation.
They know that I'm aware of the challenges that are there, but they also know that I learned how to get legislation passed. And I can suggest, well, why don't you take this and use an amendment here, and instead of one big major piece of legislation, you could do big things with just a few amendments that will allow things to happen.
Williams previously served as Huntington city manager in 1984 and 1985. Before the city went to a strong mayoral system. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Clark Davis in Huntington.
In a moment, Charleston Mayor Danny Jones. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 539 to exclude disability income received by a veteran for service-related injuries from any calculation used to determine spousal support. Senate Bill 545 authorizing the use of excess contributions by the candidate to pay back any loans or debts from previous campaigns. And Senate Bill 546 to require the appointment of the state superintendent of schools be with the advice and consent of the Senate. Up for passage in the Senate on Monday, Senate Bill 108, creating the Unintentional Pharmaceutical Drug Overdose Fatality Review Team under the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner to look at the circumstances of these deaths and recommend policy changes. Senate Bill 353, establishing the first Informer Broadcasters Act to develop comprehensive, coordinated plans for preparing for and responding appropriately to an emergency or disaster. And Senate Bill 464, to regulate tanning facilities and establish criminal penalties for violations. On the one hand, the legislature wants to give cities more room to govern themselves. On the other, the House, at least, has taken away a city's right to pass a gun control ordinance. Joining us tonight is a former member of the House of Delegates, a former sheriff of Kanawha County, and now mayor of the city of Charleston, Danny Jones. Mayor Jones, welcome. Glad you're here. Okay, this gun ordinance was passed in 1993 by the city council. Why now? 20 years
Because
later.
of the change in dynamics politically in the House of Delegates, and the fact that the House now has 46 Republicans and only 54 Democrats, whereas when I was a member there were only 20 of us Republicans, and they pretty well ignored us when I was there. But now there has to be, the Democrats are paying attention, and they are trying to out-NRA the Republicans. And the bill they passed was a NRA written and sponsored bill. Let me just say this about the bill. I knew going into this that the House was going to strip away Charleston's gun ordinance. And this bill does a whole lot more than that.
What does it do?
Well, it takes away the zoning rights of cities as to where gun stores or any gun stores can go. And they could conceivably go in people's neighborhoods. For some reason, they feel like they ought to outlaw the city of Charleston buying a gun from a local citizen. And it sets up the city of Charleston for a bunch of lawsuits, which if we get into with these national organizations and they win, we have to pay all their expenses, all their bills, their hotel rooms, their plane tickets, their expert witnesses.
Is that a part of the bill?
It is part of the bill. But if we lose, if we win, we don't get anything. So they have they've tilted it in favor of the plaintiffs, the would-be plaintiffs. And these are not people that are not necessarily affected by anything we do. This can come down high from some national office in Washington. That's why it's an NRA bill.
I still don't understand why now. Because there are 46 Republicans and probably enough conservative Democrats, obviously, to join 94 people to pass this piece of legislation. Do you feel like Charleston is, for lack of the word, under the gun in this particular issue? That there is some sort of Charleston bashing going on? Well,
there's always been Charleston bashing going on. There was when I was up there, and I've tried to mitigate that. But it's it's been attempted before. It's going to happen now, or at least in the House of Delegates. And the part about Charleston is not surprising. The other parts of the bill are frightening. And we're hoping that in the Senate that they will think a second time about this, and maybe even the House members, because I've been quoted as saying they didn't read the bill, and they cannot show, there's no recording, and there's no quotes in the paper of me saying that, because that's not what I said. I said they weren't familiar with the content of the bill. I have a theory about this, and I think what happened is that there were so many gun bills introduced that when Chairman Miley got up, and I listened to the tape again today, all he talked about was the city gun ordinances.
Yes,
he didn't mention all the other things that were in the bill. And I think that's all the people thought they were voting on. So stripping away Charleston's gun ordinance is a pretty easy target, especially when one of the delegates that was such a fierce proponent of the bill and a member of Senator Thompson's leadership team, is a part of the Charleston delegation.
Well, we'll watch for this as it heads to the Senate and see what happens. Let's touch for a little bit on this home rule. How has it helped Charleston? Steve Williams seems to think it's helped Huntington pretty well. How has it helped Charleston?
Well, it's helped us tremendously. It helped us with when we do construction work, when we let out a project, with how we lay out the design and how we configure that. And it mainly with something as simple as enforcing building ordinances, which we can do them immediately instead of having to put out a letter and wait 21 days, and on the 21st day it's fixed, and then the 22nd day it's bad again, and we have to write another letter. That's over. What I would urge people to do, and especially hopefully legislators, read their own legislative audit. It's an easy read, and I think during the time this show was on, we could have almost read it. Mm-hmm. And it lauds this program, and it's very positive, and I think it's something maybe the legislature and the cities can agree on. I hope they can. Do you feel like you have to be careful talking about this, because now it goes to the House? I am never careful when I'm talking. I just answer questions, and if the House is going to defeat it, they're going to defeat it. There's nothing we can do about it. But if you don't like Charleston, I would at least say look at some of the other cities. We're going to do a tax configuration similar to Huntington. Mm-hmm. We're going to do a ½ cent sales tax, but we're going to lower our retail, and we're going to do away with our manufacturing tax. I think this is going to be good for all of us. All right. Mayor Danny Jones, I appreciate you coming on and talking about all these issues. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today. Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 2946 to permit the sale of alcoholic beverages on Sunday mornings beginning at 10 a.m. by restaurants, private clubs, and licensees that sell wine to be consumed on the premises. House Bill 2951 to provide enhanced criminal and civil protections to individuals who use force in protecting themselves, their property, or other individuals from certain criminal activities of others. And House Bill 2952 to create the Work Share West Virginia program, in which a participating employer reduces the number of hours worked by its employees in lieu of laying them off. Up for passage in the House on Monday, House Bill 2046 to require wireless telecommunications companies to release location information of a missing person's cell phone, iPad, or other device in a timely manner to law enforcement in emergency situations. House Bill 2497 to require applicants for licenses under the West Virginia Real Estate License Act to successfully pass criminal history record checks. On second reading on Monday, House Bill 2861 to remove a deterrent to public schools in seeking and assisting the enrollment of a student who is at risk and is becoming a discouraged and defeated learner. A resolution adopted on the Senate floor today designated an 1819 model rifle, thought to be one of the two guns laying at the feet of the miner and farmer on the state seal, as the official firearm of West Virginia. The Hall flintlock rifle was originally manufactured at the National Armory in Harper's Ferry by John H. Hall in 1817. Hall was commissioned by the U.S. Army that year to deliver 100 of the rifles for military use, and again in 1819 for 1,000 guns, after military officials took interest in his ideas on interchangeable parts. The flintlock was the first entirely machine-made weapon ever devised, and the first military-commissioned breech loader ever invented. The weapon was the first to be able to be loaded by removing a block from the barrel near the operator, instead of pouring powder and ramming the bullet into the muzzle. Senate Majority Leader Senator John Unger of Berkeley County says there are only 3 known models of the gun left in existence, including the model brought to the Senate from the National Park in Harper's Ferry.
Mr. President, this is a very historic a gun for West Virginia, manufactured in West Virginia, and actually has been very much part of the history of West Virginia. And on this sesquicentennial year of the formation of our state, I think it's only appropriate that we would recognize this as a very historical gun for our state. So with that, Mr. President, I would ask that this resolution be adopted. Thank you.
Unger says the same model was also still in use during the Civil War some 50 years later. The resolution to name the rifle as the official state firearm passed unanimously. It's now headed to the House. And this has been the Legislature Today. We'll be back on Monday to report all the news and information from the first regular session of the 81st West Virginia Legislature. Next week, our focus will be on children and poverty. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.